Everything looked perfect. The silence, the elegance, the effortless grace of London's elite. But behind those walls, no one was truly free. Every movement was calculated, because one wrong gesture, a laugh too loud, a glance held a second too long, could quietly ruin a career, a marriage, a future. Not with confrontation, not with conflict, with silence, with absence, with a name quietly removed from every guest list in London. In 1880, a single afternoon in the life of a Victorian aristocrat wasn't about comfort. It was about survival through the performance of perfection. From the moment they woke to the final candlelit gathering at night, they were being watched, judged, remembered, and one small mistake could destroy everything. Today, you're stepping inside that world, not to admire it, to understand what it cost. London, 1880. The city never truly slept, but inside the aristocratic districts, the noise softened into something more controlled, almost rehearsed. Behind tall iron gates and perfectly trimmed hedges, a grand townhouse stood in quiet authority. Its pale stone facade, darkened slightly by London fog, revealed nothing of the life unfolding within. The curtains were drawn just enough to allow light in, but never enough to expose what lay beyond. Inside, the afternoon had begun, not with chaos, not with haste, with silence. A deep, deliberate silence, broken only by the faint ticking of a clock in the corridor and the distant footsteps of servants who had learned long ago how to move without being heard. A maid adjusted the folds of heavy velvet curtains, ensuring they fell in perfect symmetry. Another passed through the hallway carrying a silver tray, her posture straight, her gaze lowered, trained not to look, not to speak unless spoken to. No one rushed, because in this world, rushing was a sign of disorder. And disorder was not merely frowned upon, it was remembered. Upstairs, in a spacious bedroom lit by filtered daylight, the aristocrat stirred. Not abruptly, but with the calm certainty of someone who had never needed to hurry for anything in life, at least not visibly. A servant waited just outside the door, still, silent, ready. She knew the exact moment to enter, not by being called, but by understanding the unspoken rhythm that governed everything in that house. A soft knock. Then, without waiting for a reply, she entered, eyes lowered, steps controlled. She approached with precision and began preparing the room for the afternoon, adjusting garments, setting out accessories, ensuring that every detail aligned with what society demanded, not what comfort required. Comfort was never part of the equation. Outside, London moved in contrast. Carriages rolled over damp cobblestones, vendors called out in the distance, smoke from chimneys blended into the gray sky. But inside that house, time felt slower, more rigid, as if every hour had been scheduled long before this day ever began. The aristocrat rose, not freely, but correctly. There was a way to stand, a way to walk, a way to exist. Even in the privacy of one's own chamber, one was never entirely alone, because reputation did not begin in public. It began here, in the smallest gestures, in the way one adjusted their sleeves, in the posture held even when no one seemed to be watching. By the time the first words of the afternoon were spoken, everything had already been decided. The clothes, the schedule, the image. Nothing was accidental. And to the outside world, it would all appear effortless. But it was not effortless. It was a discipline practiced until it looked like nature. And nature, in Victorian London, was the most dangerous illusion of all. By the time the aristocrat left the bedroom, the transformation had already begun. Mourning in the Victorian world was not meant to be seen. It was informal, transitional, almost invisible. The afternoon, however, that was when one truly existed. And existence, in 1880 London, demanded precision. In the dressing room, garments had been carefully arranged long before the aristocrat arrived. Nothing was chosen in the moment. Choice was a luxury reserved for those without a reputation to protect. A valet or a lady's maid stood ready. Because dressing was not a simple act, it was a ritual, a declaration. For a gentleman, This meant structured tailoring, a fresh shirt, stiff with starch, carefully fastened, a waistcoat aligned to the body, a coat placed with deliberate care, ensuring the silhouette conveyed authority without appearing to try.
For a woman, the transformation was something else entirely. The corset came first. Always the corset, pulled tight, not violently but firmly. Firmly enough to reshape the body into something society approved of, something it did not naturally produce on its own. And here is what most people do not know. This was not harmless. Physicians of the era documented women with ribs permanently displaced, bones pushed inward over years of wear, reshaping the skeleton itself. Doctors knew, society knew. No one spoke of it openly. The discomfort was simply part of the agreement. Each inhale had to be measured, each exhale restrained. Not enough to collapse, but never enough to feel free. Then came the layers, fabric upon fabric, skirts arranged to create volume, sleeves adjusted to fold just right, every fold positioned with mathematical precision. The mirror reflected not a person, but a role. Jewelry was selected not for beauty alone, but for meaning, subtle signals of status, wealth, and family lineage. A brooch placed too low could suggest ignorance of current fashion. A ring worn on the wrong finger could invite questions no one wanted asked. Hair was styled accordingly, never excessive, never careless. Each strand arranged as if permanence were required. The aristocrat stood still as the final adjustments were made. A cuff straightened, a collar aligned, a glove placed into waiting hands. Only then was the transformation complete. This was no longer the private individual who had awakened minutes before. This was the version the world was allowed to see. Polished, controlled, unquestionable. Outside the room, the house had already adapted to this shift. Servants moved with increased awareness. Doors opened before they were reached. Pathways cleared without instruction. Because the afternoon was not just a period of time, it was a stage. And now the performance had officially begun. There would be visitors, observations, judgments hidden behind polite smiles and carefully measured conversations. Every detail would be noticed. Every detail would be stored. And across the city, in drawing rooms very much like this one, others were doing exactly the same, preparing, adjusting, calibrating, each one aware that they were being evaluated by people who were simultaneously being evaluated by them. In Victorian London, you were never simply yourself. You were what society allowed you to be. And once the afternoon began, there was no stepping out of character. By the time the clock marked the middle of the afternoon, the house shifted once again. Not visibly, but subtly, like a quiet signal had passed through the walls, informing everyone that it was time. Time for tea. But this was not a pause in the day. In Victorian England, afternoon tea was a social institution, a ritual invented less than 40 years earlier and already so deeply embedded in aristocratic life that skipping it or performing it incorrectly carried real consequences. In the drawing room, everything had been prepared with meticulous care. The table arranged with fine porcelain. The teapot rested at the center, polished, warm, and waiting. Nothing random, nothing casual. Even the light seemed intentional, filtered through lace curtains that softened the room into controlled elegance. The aristocrat entered, and with that single step, the room came to life. Not with noise, with presence. Guests arrived soon after, each entrance following an unspoken code. A measured pause at the threshold. A greeting delivered with exact tone and posture. Smiles appeared, refined, restrained, almost identical. The tea was served, and even this simple act carried weight. Who poured first mattered. Who was served first mattered. How the cup was held mattered. The handle was never fully grasped. The wrist remained relaxed. The movement minimal, because elegance in this world was defined not by what you did, but by how little effort it appeared to require. Small sandwiches were offered. Pastries followed, arranged with such precision that choosing one felt like disrupting a display. But the true purpose of this gathering was not the tea. It was observation. Across the table, something was already unfolding. A word had landed slightly wrong. Not wrong enough to address, but wrong enough to be felt. Eyes moved. A small silence opened between two guests that had not existed a moment before. No one acknowledged it. Everyone registered it. Conversations moved gently around the room, topics chosen with care. Politics could be hinted at, but not argued. Scandals could be referenced but never directly named. And beneath every polite exchange ran something else entirely: evaluation. Each guest was being seen, measured, compared. A slight misstep, a laugh too loud, a gesture too animated, a sentence that revealed too much could linger long after the tea had ended. It could travel from drawing room to drawing room across London before nightfall.
The aristocrat understood this. Every glance was intentional, every response filtered. Not from deception, but from necessity. Because in this world, sincerity without calculation was not honesty. It was a vulnerability. The clock continued its steady ticking, time moved forward, but inside that room it felt suspended, held in place by expectations no one had written down and no one needed to. By the time the last cup was set down, everything that needed to be understood had already been understood, without a single direct word. That was the power of the ritual, and that was its danger. When the final cup was set down and the last polite smile faded, the ritual of tea dissolved into something more fluid, yet no less controlled. The afternoon was far from over. Beyond the drawing room, London awaited, not as a city to explore freely, but as a network of obligations to be navigated with precision. Visits had to be made, appearances had to be maintained, and in Victorian society, a visit was never just a visit, it was a statement. Near the entrance hall, a tray rested by the door. On it, a small stack of thick engraved cards, calling cards, each one carrying a name pressed permanently into the paper, because even identity had to be presented with formality. The handwritten version suggested haste. Haste suggested disorder. The aristocrat selected the appropriate cards, not too many, not too few, because even that number could be interpreted. Outside, the carriage was already waiting, polished, still. The door opened before it was reached. A servant stepped aside. No words were exchanged. They were not necessary. The movement through the city was smooth. London passed by in muted tones, stone buildings, damp streets, figures moving at a distance. But inside the carriage, everything remained composed, contained. The first stop approached, but not every visit required entry. In many cases, the act of arriving was enough. A servant would step forward, deliver the calling card, and return. That alone sent a message. I was here. I remembered you. I acknowledged your place. Sometimes that was all that mattered, and sometimes the absence of a card said far more than the card itself. There are documented accounts of women in Victorian London who received no calling cards for an entire social season. Not one. No confrontation, no explanation, simply absence. And within weeks, they had quietly disappeared from every guest list in the city. Their social existence had ended not with a scandal, but with a silence so thorough it was almost surgical. When entry was granted, the rules intensified. The aristocrat stepped inside with measured grace. Every movement observed, posture, expression, the timing of each step. The greeting was brief, never exaggerated, never overly warm, because familiarity had limits. Too much warmth implied a lack of restraint, too little implied hostility. The correct calibration lived in a very narrow space. The visit itself followed an invisible structure. It could not be too long, that suggested intrusion. Too short, that suggested indifference. Time, once again, was controlled. Conversation was more focused here, more strategic. This was where alliances were subtly reinforced or quietly weakened. A compliment could elevate, a hesitation could create distance, all of it hidden beneath perfect manners. The aristocrat remained composed, every word chosen, every reaction filtered, because one mistake, just one, could travel faster than any carriage in London. As the visit concluded, there was no dramatic farewell, a controlled exit, a final glance, a measured nod, then departure, back into the carriage, back into motion, another address, another door, another silent exchange of status and recognition. To an outsider, it would appear repetitive, even meaningless. But within this world, it was everything. By the time the carriage returned and the doors of the house closed once more, the pace of the afternoon softened, but it did not relax. Because in the Victorian world, even rest had rules. The aristocrat moved back into the interior spaces of the house, drawing rooms, private lounges, quiet corners designed not for freedom, but for the display of stillness. This was the hour called leisure, or at least what society called leisure. A book was selected, not randomly. Its subject, its author, even the act of being seen holding it, all of it reflected something about the person reading it. Intellect, taste, refinement. In a world where conversation was guarded, the book in one's hands could speak volumes. The aristocrat sat, posture intact, movements minimal. Pages turned slowly, never rushed. Because haste suggested agitation, and agitation suggested that something had disrupted the order of one's inner world. In another part of the room, a piano stood waiting. For many, especially women of status, music was not merely a talent. It was proof of cultivation. The expectation was clear. A woman who could not perform at the piano was either poorly educated or poorly connected. Fingers touched the keys, softly at first, then with practiced precision. The melody filled the room, not loudly but with intention. Every note measured, every pause deliberate. There was no room for improvisation because even art followed rules. Elsewhere in the house, preparations were already being made for a brief outing. A carriage ride through one of London's more fashionable areas, Hyde Park perhaps. But this was not exercise, it was exposure. To be seen, again, in a different setting, outdoors yet still observed. Clothing adjusted accordingly, accessories added, because the outside world required just as much calculation as the inside. The aristocrat stepped out once more. The air carried the familiar weight of London, cool, slightly damp, touched by coal smoke. Carriages passed, figures moved along the gravel paths, and among them, the same silent exchanges continued. Glances, recognitions, subtle acknowledgments between members of the same social world, status identifying status. No introduction needed. Even the act of walking had a rhythm, neither too fast nor too slow, because movement itself could be judged. A man who walked too quickly appeared anxious. A woman who moved too freely appeared unrestrained. Eventually, the aristocrat returned, back to the house, back to the controlled quiet. From the outside, this part of the day appeared calm, pleasant, even enviable. Books, music, gentle outings through a beautiful city. But beneath that surface, every action had been observed. Every detail had contributed to an image that had to be maintained. There was no true escape, not in solitude, not in silence, because in this world, even when no one seemed to be watching, you were still being seen. As the afternoon began to fade, the illusion remained intact. From the outside, everything still appeared effortless, composed, refined, untouched by discomfort. But inside, the truth was surfacing. Beneath the tailored fabrics and carefully arranged layers, the body told a different story. For women, the corset, tightened hours earlier, had not loosened. It held firm, restricting movement, controlling posture, limiting every breath to something smaller than what the lungs wanted. Each inhale was still measured, each exhale restrained. Not enough to collapse, but never enough to feel free. For men, the structure was different but no less rigid. Stiff collars pressed against the neck for hours. Layers of fabric trapped heat against the skin regardless of the season. Even sitting required constant awareness, spine straight, shoulders aligned, no position entirely comfortable. Relaxation was not a natural state, it was managed. And managing it, hour after hour, had a cost. A subtle fatigue had begun to settle. Not visible, not acknowledged, but present. Because in this world, discomfort was not something to be expressed, it was something to be endured, silently. In the corridors, servants continued their work, unseen, unacknowledged, yet essential to sustaining every element of the illusion. They moved quickly now, though still without sound. Unlike the aristocrat, their exhaustion was immediate and physical. Their hands carried weight, their steps held urgency. They were part of the system, but never part of the image. Back in the private rooms, small cracks had begun to appear. A glove removed with slightly more force than necessary. A breath held just a moment too long. A pause, brief, almost imperceptible, where the body demanded relief and the mind refused. Even alone, the performance did not end. Because reputation was not something worn only in public. It had been internalized. It lived in posture, in habit, in reflex. There was no longer a clear line between who one was and who one was expected to be. The aristocrat stood near a window, looking out but not fully present. For the first time that afternoon, stillness revealed something uncomfortable. Not disorder, but weight. The weight of a life that allowed no deviation, no unguarded moment, no version of the self that was allowed to simply exist without purpose. Everything had been correct, every gesture precise, every word measured, and yet there was no release. The elegance remained, untouched, flawless, but beneath it, there was pressure, constant, invisible, unforgiving. And as the light outside began to fade, the day was not ending. It was only transforming, because the most demanding part was still to come. The light outside began to fade, slowly at first, almost imperceptibly. Then, all at once, London shifted. Shadows stretched across the streets, the gray sky deepened, and one by one, gas lamps flickered to life, casting a warm, trembling glow that transformed the city into something softer and far more theatrical. Inside the house, the transition was immediate. The afternoon was over. Servants moved with renewed urgency, still silent, still precise, but faster, because evening demanded more, much more. In the dressing room, everything was ready again. A second transformation, more elaborate, more demanding, more visible. The garments of the afternoon were carefully removed, not discarded but set aside, as if they had fulfilled a role that was now complete. For men, darker tones now, sharper lines, greater contrast. Evening attire carried weight. It commanded presence in a way that afternoon clothing merely suggested. For women, the change was striking. Fabrics became richer, details more intricate, the silhouette more dramatic. Necklines shifted, not for exposure but for elegance as the era defined it. Jewelry was no longer subtle. It spoke. Light caught on every surface, drawing attention without a single word spoken. Hair was restyled, not casually, but as if preparing for scrutiny from every angle. Because the night was where everything was truly seen. The aristocrat stood once more before the mirror, but this time the reflection felt different, more intense, less forgiving. Because evening was not about suggestion, it was about absolute presence. Downstairs, the house awakened. Candles lit in every room. Chandeliers shimmered above polished floors. The air carried faint notes of perfume mixed with wax and the distant smoke of the city beyond. Voices gathered. Carriages arrived. Doors opened. Dinners, gatherings, conversations that appeared light but carried consequences. This was where alliances could shift, where reputations could rise or quietly fall. The tone of a greeting, the length of eye contact, the timing of a response. Under candlelight, nothing could be hidden. The aristocrat entered, and once again, the performance continued, but now amplified. More people, more attention, more pressure, more at stake. From the outside, it was breathtaking. Movement, light, music, voices, all blending into something that felt almost perfect. But beneath it, the same truth remained. Nothing here was accidental. Nothing was free. Every moment was constructed, every gesture intentional, every identity maintained. The night would go on, hours would pass, and the role would not break. Because in this world, there was no final curtain, only transitions. From afternoon to evening, from one version of perfection to another. And as London shimmered under the glow of its lamps, one thing became undeniable. Elegance, in the Victorian era, was not a privilege, it was a discipline. A constant, unyielding discipline that shaped lives, defined identities, and demanded everything, in return for the illusion of perfection. And the most disturbing part? Most of them never questioned it, because the cage, when built elegantly enough, does not look like a cage at all.